Hey guys, it's Farrell, and I'm back with version 2 of the Shulker Mover that I threw out on a video the other day. Now, right now, this is still kind of a work in progress, but I have some improvements that I've been able to make. And most of that's due to actually seeing a video by REDSTONE where he built a horizontal Shulker Mover, so he's got water streams and a very similar idea to the whole kick the shulker chest out once it's filled up. So what I did is actually went back and watched his video, and I have the redstone that he used pretty much in place. So what I've got down here are the two comparators. One's in subtract mode, the other one's in the compare mode. And the compare mode is set up like this against this chest. This doesn't have to be diamonds, this could be anything you want, obviously. But you'll see that the piston just kicked off over there because it finally finished loading everything up. What I'm going to do is actually take out all these guys because I want the next shulker to actually show up properly. I've got a couple of green ones in this, well, I've got two green in the system right now, and I've got all the rest of red upstairs. They're the ones that have very little stuff in them, so the system will cycle a little faster once I actually really kick it off. Now, the good news is whatever's going on with the comparator bugs in 1.11 doesn't seem to impact these two guys down here. So this setup is actually working pretty well. There's just enough signal strength coming out that once this is effectively full, it's enough to be able to fire off the kick piston, to kick the shulker out of the way. That's on no delay. And then after a 2-tick delay, probably about 3 when you count that the repeater, it's then going to fire off the dispenser. And the dispenser, of course, is being fed straight up from our top level. Now, I don't have to do a hopper chain. I could have done, a water drops, just plain old item drops, dispenser dropping into a hopper way down below, but hopper chain was a little more reliable. It kind of makes sure that I'm not having to try to position elements perfectly, because the alignment's a little tricky on this one. This line of hoppers, by the way, is my feed chest, in case you haven't quite figured that out. So obviously I've got that completely packed up with diamonds at this point, and it is slowly churning. I'll leave that on there so you can see it. It's slowly churning its way through. So that's the good news. The downside is it actually does take quite a while for this to run, because I do have it set for full chest mode as part of the demonstration. So our shulker is going to get kicked out, pops into this hopper here. Again, there's nothing under this hopper here except solid blocks. That way we're not draining it while we're in the process of loading it. This glass seems to be all you really need, one on top and one on the side, to keep it from flying out in most areas. The comparator seems to do a pretty good job of kind of roping it in on the side here. I haven't seen anything really wind up too far over the edge, but if you stand close enough, you can actually intercept the shulker when it gets kicked. So it goes into the bottom level of our dropper elevator, and this is the same design that I had on my previous video. That's going to get all the way up to the top here. I had a little bit of alignment issues with the redstone because of everything I need to get working up here, so I had to actually kick this part of the item elevator over that side. That's perfectly fine. It still works that way. Till the blocks wind up here in the dispenser. And you can see here's our lovely green shulker box with the full diamond. The rest of these are all filled with just red sand, so they'll go through nice and quick. Now the downside is you might notice that things aren't actually doing anything up here, and that's because if the system doesn't have shulkers in it, it stops, basically, which I guess is kind of what you want. You don't want anything to really be going on. Say you're in a loaded chunk or something, you don't want anything going on while the system's got nothing to do. So you kind of have to actually do a little bit of priming on it. And for that purpose, what I really kind of recommend is just have a button handy and kind of stick it on this side. And what that does is it engages this little piston up here, and this piston is purely to extend over the comparator, and that actually it basically updates the comparator and gets around the comparator bug. So this is kind of our reset button in a ways here. So you'll see that right now, the shulker is slowly draining out, and what's going to happen is a lot of stuff is going to happen. So the comparator signal is still high, and it's still boosting. So you can see what happened here is once the shulker finished draining, the signal's flow stopped, it went out, this turned off. This branch slowly turned off because it's a 4-tick delay on each of those repeaters. And that eventually forces the piston to reset just in time for the comparator to pick up the new shulker. So that's how I'm triggering my auto reset off of this. The rest of the signal comes down this way. You can see it just kicked again here. Try to be in a better position for filming this one. Our first stop is over here where I've got a basic NOT gate essentially set up. It's going to be off, which means that so long as I'm getting a signal saying the shulker has anything in it, it's going to let the hopper flow normally. So this is draining itself happily. And of course, once this signal turns off, you can see the piston there fired, that piston fired, all the stuff is firing off. When this drops to a low signal, over here, this is going to drop to a high, and that in turn locks this hopper. So that is what prevents the shulker from immediately dropping into it. Because this is locked, the shulker then actually goes over to the next hopper, and you can prove that because that's how it works down there. I'm having a wonderful time trying to catch this on camera, so I'll kind of stay here for a little bit. There's a wonderful thing about that, because all it has to do is just wind up on the comparator, and it will happily pop down and into that series of hoppers, so it can run back down underground. Meanwhile, this whole line is more or less almost drained. It's only going to have one item in it that's going to be sitting there at any given time at best. But you can kind of see how this flow is working, and it's working pretty well, surprisingly. In fact, I don't even think I need to keep a block up top. That was my big concern, was the shulker could kind of try to pop out somewhere. But so far, it seems to be behaving itself nicely. So the final part of this leg of the redstone, once we get past our NOT gate here for the hopper lock, obviously we have to power the kick piston that's up here, and we also have to power the dispenser. And that's kind of not too far different from down there, except over here, the timing is a little more critical because the piston really has to be out of the way, but it also has to be a pulse signal and not a constant signal, because it's getting a constant on as an input. We don't want that. We want a single pulse when the state changes, so that's enough to fire off the kick piston and the dispenser. So that's what we've got over here. We've got a pulse generator, very basic one. And once that fires off, you could just barely see, and I think you might have just seen it flash there. The pulse will travel down. It is just enough to get over to here. Fire off the kick piston on a 2-tick delay because I want to wait for this hopper to engage. So there's no delay on the hopper. The hopper locks. 2 ticks later, the kick piston is going to fire. And actually, you can see the shulker here. So actually, I guess that's proof that we do need a piece of glass up there. Well, that's great. Let's go ahead and do that. Actually, let's in. Oh, geez, you're going to take forever to have. So, and you can see you can even trigger this thing manually. So that piston actually just went back down for the heck of it. I just want to have a red one because that's got a light load. So we've got, getting back to how this works, no delay down here, or effectively one. I'm not counting repeater delays for just it being a repeater. So no delay. We've got 2-tick delay. Then over here we've got a 5-tick delay. That's just enough, it seems, on a single-player server at least, for this to have good timing. It's just enough for the piston here to retract. There's about maybe 1-tick timing, and then the dispenser fires off. Now, one downside to how I have this set up is this particular setup for the dropper elevator, because of how this works, it's also trying to fire off the dispenser. So that does kind of suck a little bit, but there's not really too much you can do with that particular setup. What I'm doing is kind of playing around with this a little bit to see if... Yes, I don't think that likes having... Yep, so that's going to be completely... Word to the wise, don't send up an empty shulker through the system, because it definitely does not like that. What I'm going to do is hit our reset button over here. The reset button did not do the reset. Interesting. Okay. And this guy should be... Yeah, he's a full one. And now I can do the reset button to fix that. So it's a little temperamental sometimes when it runs out of shulkers. So essentially, folks, the design here seems to be working pretty well. It's not 100% compact yet either, but it works pretty good for what it's doing. And I'm sure someone could come along and kind of make even more improvements on it. And there's folks over on the on X's Patreon server and over in, well, just kind of everywhere actually. But we're kind of looking at this over in the Discord chat and trying to see what we can come up with to kind of improvement. And there's going to be some videos coming out on that pretty soon as well, so I'm going to put a link to those in there once those actually come out. Just keep an eye on the video here to keep an eye out for any updates in that regards. But this is working pretty well, if slowly. I mean, the one downside is that, I mean, it's no double chest. I can't throw a second hopper under anything to make it go faster, so that's really kind of the weak part of the design. It's still... Yep, you could hear the dropper elevator firing off, so something else has just come through. Yep, so we got... You can see these are coming up with... This is the one I put in myself, but these are coming up effectively full load. Just to confirm that, if I go down here and break one of these guys... this guy is a full load chest. These are my kind of my template shulkers here. So they're coming up full load, which is good. But it is a bit of a slow system, like I said. Now, as I've said before, if I were really doing this in person, I'd probably come down and just forego the hopper feed and just drop in directly. But the downside to that then is I could overload the entire system, get a lot of stuff backlogged up here. So, yeah, kind of some interesting thoughts on what to do about that. That piece of glass is not needed, just so you guys don't get confused. I think that's pretty much the bare minimum of what you need for a glass cage around it. So anyways, if you guys like this, I'll try to see if I can throw together a little bit of a building tutorial. A lot of this has kind of been a work in progress, so it's not 100% straightforward, and obviously there's a lot of specific settings to the various repeaters here that I have set, and obviously comparators in certain modes, but it's not too complicated of a build until you get up to the redstone on top. And even then, like I said, the pulse generator is really key. You have to have something that is going to give you just a blip of a signal when this stuff needs to fire that's not going to let the high power through. So that, I think, has worked out pretty well, and I am looking forward to actually seeing if anyone's got some other ideas as to how we can improve this. And maybe what I'll do is actually also take this into kind of a real world and actually do a full-on size mock-up and just kind of see how this is going to run over a longer distance, because right now it's obviously a short distance, and as we found out, the key here is it's a little tricky sometimes to work in the item dropper elevator. The distance, you can kind of be one block off in vertical, and it kind of throws everything off. I did that mistake earlier, which is why all this redstone is tucked down on the bottom here. I was actually one layer off and had to rebuild the entire elevator after I had wired up everything up here and realized that nothing was flowing up from the bottom properly. So anyways, let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you guys later.